There is a figure that crosses cultures, centuries, and symbolism, a being that inhabits the border between what is known and what does not yet have a name. She is ancient, and antiquity, for those who know how to read it, is synonymous with depth. Today she is looking at her own reflection, not to see herself, to find herself strange. And there is something in that gesture that is rarer than it seems, because most of us spend the majority of our time completely immersed in the experience of existing, without ever stopping to notice that we are existing, without ever stepping back far enough to realize that there is something profoundly strange and profoundly extraordinary in the simple fact of being here, conscious, looking at the world from inside a specific body, in a specific moment, in a life that is unrepeatable in ways we rarely stop to consider. Today, the question we brought is one of the oldest there is, and one of the most rarely asked with real attention. What is this strange feeling of being alive, and what is it trying to tell us about who we are and where we are? Let's sit with that question slowly, without rushing to answer it. Just inhabit it for a few minutes. Have you ever had a moment when you suddenly became very aware that you exist? Not in an abstract philosophical sense. In a very concrete and sometimes slightly unsettling sense. You were doing something completely ordinary, washing dishes, driving a familiar route, sitting in a meeting, in the middle of a conversation, and suddenly, without warning, something changed in the quality of your attention. And for a moment, sometimes brief, sometimes longer, you saw yourself from the outside. Not literally, but with a kind of internal distance that wasn't there a second before. A sudden awareness that you are a specific person, in a specific body, at a specific moment in an enormous story that happened before you and will continue after. That you are here, and that here is a far stranger place than routine allows you to notice. Sometimes this feeling is gentle, a lightness, an opening, as if the world momentarily became more vivid than it usually is. Sometimes it is more intense, a kind of existential vertigo, the feeling that the words you use to describe reality are suddenly inadequate for what reality actually is. And almost always it passes quickly. Routine returns. Tasks call. The mind finds something concrete to occupy itself with, and that window, that momentary opening onto something without a very precise name, closes. But it leaves a trace, a feeling that you touched something you cannot name, and that perhaps it is worth not letting pass so quickly. There is a technical name for some aspects of this experience. Philosophy calls it estrangement or defamiliarization, the moment when the familiar suddenly appears as if it were strange. The Russian Ostrany, a concept developed by the literary formalists, described how great art does exactly this, removes the automatism from perception and returns to the reader the feeling of seeing what was always there as if for the first time. But the experience we are describing goes beyond the aesthetic. It is more personal, more intimate, and, for many people, more unsettling. Because there is a difference between finding an object or a situation strange, and finding your own existence strange. Finding an object strange is safe. You are still on the outside, observing. Finding your own existence strange, suddenly realizing that you are the being having the experience, that there is a you here that doesn't completely know what it is, that the consciousness you use to think about everything is itself a mystery that cannot resolve itself, that has a different quality. A quality that most of us learn very early not to examine for too long. There is a technical name for some aspects of this experience. Philosophy calls it estrangement or defamiliarization, the moment when the familiar suddenly appears as if it were strange. The Russian Ostrany, a concept developed by the literary formalists, described how great art does exactly this, removes the automatism from perception and returns to the reader the feeling of seeing what was always there as if for the first time. But the experience we are describing goes beyond the aesthetic. It is more personal, more intimate, and, for many people, more unsettling. The existentialist philosopher Albert Camus wrote about what he called the absurd, not as a joke, but as the real and permanent tension between the human desire for clarity and meaning, and the universe's silence in the face of that desire. He was not being pessimistic. He was being honest about an experience that almost every human being has had, that of asking something fundamental about existence and receiving as an answer not an explanation, but a silence that is at once unsettling and, in some strange way, also profoundly real. Camus did not propose fleeing that silence, or pretending it doesn't exist. He proposed inhabiting the question with honesty, with presence, without the rush to cover it with answers that don't reach what it is really asking. In Zen Buddhism, there is a practice called the koan, a paradoxical question given by the master to the student not to be answered logically, but to be inhabited until the very structure of the thinking that would need to answer it transforms. The most famous koan, "What was your face before your parents were born?" points directly at this question, not toward an answer, toward the recognition that existing precedes any explanation for why you exist, and that this precedence, this pure and simple fact of being here before any justification, is in itself a mystery worth meeting directly. There is something modern neuroscience discovered about consciousness that echoes, in a surprising way, what Zen and existentialism always pointed toward. That consciousness, the subjective experience of being someone, of there being a here from which you observe the world, is the hardest problem in modern science. Not for lack of effort, because consciousness has a property that no physical phenomenon has. It is from the inside. You can describe all the neurons that fire when someone sees red, but you cannot describe what it is to see red from inside. That interior, that subjective quality of experience, is what philosophers of mind call qualia, and it remains, after decades of intense research, fundamentally mysterious. What this means in practice is something simple and at the same time vertiginous, that you are carrying, in your most ordinary daily experience, something that the most advanced science in the world still cannot completely explain. That the fact that there is something it is like to be you, that there is a unique and unrepeatable perspective from inside which you experience every moment of your life, is a phenomenon without precedent in anything we know of in the universe. And we move through this with alarms, meetings, to-do lists, and worries about what the other person thought when you said that thing. What if the strangeness weren't the problem? There is a very human tendency to treat any sensation that is not immediately comfortable as something to be resolved. Anxiety needs to be calmed. Sadness needs to be processed. And existential strangeness, that feeling that your own existence is more mysterious than routine admits, needs to be covered with enough busyness that it doesn't appear too often. But what if that feeling were not a sign that something is wrong? What if it were the clearest sign that something is right? Because think about what is happening when you find your own existence strange. You have stepped, for a moment, out of autopilot. You stopped processing reality as a series of tasks and began experiencing it as a phenomenon. You came into contact with something that is always present but that the speed of daily life makes practically invisible. The simple and extraordinary fact that you are here, conscious, alive, experiencing. That is not disturbance. That is awakening. The difference between a person who lives an entire life without ever finding their own existence strange and a person who stops from time to recognize that existing is strange and extraordinary is not that the second is more anxious or less healthy. It is that the second is more awake. And there is a specific freedom that comes with this recognition. When you recognize that your existence is, at the most fundamental level, a mystery that cannot be completely explained, that you are here in a way that was not chosen, that the consciousness you use to think about everything is itself inexplicable, that every moment of your life is unrepeatable in ways your mind rarely stops to notice, there is a subtle but real shift in the way you relate to the everyday. Not everything needs to make sense immediately. Not every question needs an answer. Not every experience needs to be categorized before it is lived. And then the question changes. It is no longer, what is this strange feeling of existing? It becomes, how do I live in a way that honors how extraordinary the simple fact of being here actually is? That question doesn't have a single answer. It has a direction. The direction of waking up a little more to your own life. Of finding, even in the most ordinary days, the moments when reality appears more vivid than habit allows. Of stopping, from time to time, at the edge of a lake, and looking at your own reflection with the honest curiosity of someone who still doesn't completely know what they are looking at. And finding in that not anxiety, but wonder. Every serious contemplative tradition arrived, in different ways, at the same starting point. Not at an answer about what consciousness is, but at the recognition that the fact that there is consciousness, that there is subjective experience, that there is an interior from which the world is encountered, is the most fundamental and most mysterious phenomenon there is. And all of them developed practices not to resolve that mystery, but to inhabit it in ways that transform whoever inhabits it. In the Christian mystical tradition, particularly in the writings of Meister Eckhart, the 13th century philosopher and preacher who was one of the most radical thinkers of the invisible in the West, there is an idea that runs through his entire body of work. The idea that there exists in every human being a point of direct contact with the divine that cannot be mediated by concepts, by words, by traditions, or by rituals. A place where the created and the uncreated touch, where the experience of being you touches something that is prior to any form that reality has taken. He called this point the Funklein, the spark. And what he said about it is that it cannot be taught, cannot be transmitted by another, can only be recognized from within, in the silence that exists when you stop trying to explain what you are and simply notice that you are here. The strangeness of your own existence in that language is not a philosophical problem. It is the moment the spark flickers. It is the moment when the habitual distance between you and your own life diminishes enough that you touch, for a second, something that was always there but that the everyday noise covers. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke, who lived this question with an intensity that few managed to transform into language with the same beauty, wrote in the Duino Elegies about the human condition as something unique in the cosmos. That the angels, in his poetic cosmology, do not have what we have, the experience of being transient, of existing in time, of knowing it will end. And that this transience, which we tend to see as our weakness, is in fact what makes our experience singular. That to exist in time, in a passing and unrepeatable way, is a form of intensity that no eternity can have. That each moment lived with real presence carries a weight of reality that has no equivalent in any other form of existence we can imagine. And Zen returns here with its most direct and least adorned way of saying the same thing. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. The activity doesn't change. The quality of presence changes. And the quality of presence changes not when you find the answer to the mystery of existing, but when you stop fleeing it. When you can sit at the edge of the lake, look at your own reflection, and not completely know what you are looking at, and find in that not knowing not anxiety, but a way of being more fully here. There is something that no tradition can give you directly, can point, can create conditions, can offer language that comes close. But the encounter with the mystery of your own existence is always direct. It happens from within, in the silence between one thought and the next, in the moment when you stop processing and begin to perceive. It is not a belief you adopt. It is not a practice you master. It is a recognition you allow. And when you allow it, when you stay for a moment with the strangeness of being here without rushing to cover it with explanation or occupation, a specific quality appears. Not necessarily peace, not certainty, something closer to belonging. As if the universe, which is as inexplicable as you are, recognized in you something of its own nature. As if existing, simply existing, with all its opacity and all its mystery were enough. More than enough. The fox's alchemy, here, finds its most intimate meaning, because the alchemist always knew that the greatest transmutation is not of external matter. It is of the gaze. The transformation is not of what you see. It is of the quality with which you see. And when you manage to look at your own life, at the simple and extraordinary fact of being here, conscious, in this specific moment, with the same attention the fox gives to her reflection in the lake, something shifts in the relationship between you and your own existence. It stops being merely the background to everything that happens, and begins to be the thing itself. There is a specific moment, and you have probably had one, when life stopped being merely the background to everything you are doing and became the thing itself. A sunset you saw differently from all other sunsets. A laugh from someone you love that arrived whole. A moment of silence that was not uncomfortable. It was deep. An instant of awareness so simple and so complete that you knew it was happening while it was happening. Those moments are not rare because life doesn't offer them. They are rare because we are rarely available for them. They are rare because we are rarely available for them. Because real availability, the openness to experience what is happening without immediately processing it, without already thinking about the next step, without reducing the moment to a category the mind already knows, is one of the most difficult things there is in an era that rewards speed and productivity above almost everything else. And yet those moments arrive, sometimes in the middle of an emotional storm, sometimes in the monotony of an ordinary afternoon, sometimes at the edge of a lake, looking at a reflection that suddenly seems more mysterious than it should. And when they arrive, when you meet them with enough presence not to let them pass immediately, they reveal something that no achievement, no arrival, no reached goal reveals in the same way. That you are already here, that here is an extraordinary place, and that the strangeness you feel, that specific sensation that existing is more complex and more vast than the language you have to describe it, is not a problem waiting to be solved. It is the most honest signal you have that you are truly alive. There is no answer for why there is something rather than nothing. There is no complete explanation for why there is an interior from which you encounter the world. There is no theory that fully captures what it is to be you, with all your specific history, with all your particular way of feeling things, with everything you carry that has never been carried by anyone in the same way. And perhaps there doesn't need to be. Perhaps the task is not to solve the mystery. Perhaps the task is to inhabit it with enough presence that it stops seeming like a problem and begins to seem like a gift. The fox at the edge of the lake resolved nothing. She touched the surface of the water and the reflection dissolved. She watched the reflection reform. She stayed with the night that came and the stars that appeared, above and below at the same time, and found, in that ordinary and extraordinary moment, something without a precise enough name, but that you recognize when you feel it. The question that remains, not to be answered, but to be carried like a lantern over the coming days, is this: in how many moments of your life are you present enough to notice that you are alive, and what changes when you stop, for an instant, to find the extraordinary that lives inside the ordinary of your own existence? If something here is still moving inside you, if that window that usually closes quickly stayed open a little longer today, perhaps it is worth continuing to walk this path. And if you would like, write in the comments a moment when you felt the strangeness of being alive and what it left in you. It doesn't need to be elaborate. Sometimes one sentence is enough to name the unnameable. I am certain that what you write will reach someone who needed permission to stop and notice. Existing is strange. Existing is extraordinary. And those two things are, at the deepest level, the same.